He was dragged from his grave, dressed in his finest robes, seated on a throne, and forced to stand trial for crimes he allegedly committed while alive. The only problem? He had been dead for 9 months. This is not a story from a Gothic horror novel. This happened inside the walls of the Vatican in the year 897, and it remains one of the most disturbing, most theatrical, and most politically explosive events in the entire history of the Catholic Church. And almost nobody knows it happened. The man on trial was Pope Formosus. He had served as pope for 5 years, from 891 to 896, and by most accounts he was a capable, if deeply controversial, leader. He navigated treacherous political waters, forged alliances with powerful kings, and made decisions that rearranged the power structure of medieval Europe. But when he died of natural causes in April of 896, he probably believed, as most dead men do, that his days of facing consequences were over. He was wrong. The man who orchestrated what history would come to call the Cadaver Synod was Pope Stephen VII. Stephen despised Formosus with a fury that went far beyond ordinary rivalry. At the heart of the conflict was a deeply complicated question of papal legitimacy and political loyalty. Formosus had crowned Lambert of Spoleto as Holy Roman Emperor, then later crowned Lambert's rival, Lambert of Spoleto's enemy, King Arnulf of East Francia, as a competing emperor. This political maneuvering had consequences that rippled outward long after Formosus drew his last breath, and Stephen was determined to make those consequences permanent. So, in January of 897, Pope Stephen VII ordered the body of Formosus to be exhumed from its resting place in St. Peter's Basilica. The corpse, already in an advanced state of decay, was dressed in papal vestments, placed upright on a throne in the courtroom of the Lateran Palace, and subjected to a formal ecclesiastical trial with witnesses, accusations, and a defense attorney, who was, notably, too terrified to speak. Stephen himself reportedly screamed at the rotting body, pacing back and forth, shrieking accusations at a man who could not respond, in front of an audience of clergy who were reportedly shaking with fear and barely concealed revulsion. The charges against Formosus included perjury, coveting the papacy, and most critically, violating church law by serving as a bishop in 2 separate dioceses simultaneously. If you're finding this story as extraordinary as it truly is, this is exactly the kind of buried history we uncover on this channel every single week. Hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss an episode, because history is far stranger than any fiction. Now, back to that courtroom. The verdict, shockingly, was a foregone conclusion. Formosus was found guilty on every charge. The papal vestments were torn from his decaying body. The 3 fingers on his right hand, the fingers he had used to perform ordinations, were cut off. Every act he had performed as pope was declared null and void. Every bishop he had ordained, every emperor he had crowned, every document he had signed, all of it, retroactively erased. The body was then thrown into the Tiber River like garbage. But here is where the story becomes even more extraordinary. The people of Rome were horrified. Witnesses to the trial described it as a scene of madness, of a living pope raving at a rotting corpse while terrified clergy looked on in silence. Stories began circulating that the body of Formosus was pulled from the Tiber by monks who witnessed miracles occurring near it. The corpse, according to these accounts, was secretly reburied. Public outrage grew rapidly. Within months, Pope Stephen VII himself was overthrown. A popular revolt stripped him of his papal robes, threw him into prison, and, in a twist that feels almost like divine irony, he was strangled to death in his cell before the year was out. The reversal came swiftly and decisively. The new pope, Theodore II, immediately ordered that Formosus be rehabilitated. The body was recovered, redressed in papal vestments, and given a proper burial in St. Peter's Basilica. Subsequent popes confirmed the rehabilitation, declaring all of Formosus's acts as pope to be valid once again. Every bishop he had ordained was reinstated. Every document he had signed was acknowledged. But the damage done to the Church's reputation was immense and lasting. The Cadaver Synod exposed something dark and deeply unstable at the heart of the medieval papacy. It showed how completely the institution could be captured by personal vendettas, political ambition, and the kind of raw, unchecked power that turns men into something barely recognizable as human. What the Cadaver Synod really was, beneath all the horror and spectacle, was a political weapon. Stephen VII was not interested in justice. He was interested in delegitimizing the alliances Formosus had made, specifically the crowning of Arnulf, in order to consolidate power for Lambert of Spoleto and his allies. By declaring all of Formosus's acts void, he was attempting to rewrite history itself. History, of course, refused to cooperate. The Cadaver Synod stands today as a symbol of what happens when institutions lose their moral compass entirely, when power becomes so concentrated in one individual that they feel they can literally put the dead on trial and expect the world to accept the verdict. It is grotesque, it is absurd, and it is absolutely real. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all. Not that it happened in a world of superstition and darkness, but that it happened inside one of the most powerful religious institutions in human history, carried out by men who believed absolutely that they were justified. The bones of Formosus rest today in St. Peter's Basilica, having survived trial, conviction, mutilation, drowning, and rehabilitation. His story is a reminder that history's strangest chapters are often its most revealing. If this story left you stunned, share it with someone who thinks they know everything about the Vatican. And subscribe to this channel because we are just getting started.